Imagine this. You're lying in a coffin, surrounded by grieving family and friends. People are crying, saying their final goodbyes, when suddenly you start gasping for air. That's exactly what happened to 76-year-old Bella Montoya from Ecuador in 2023. Doctors had officially declared her dead, and just hours later, her family placed her in a coffin for her funeral. But as mourners gathered, the coffin started shaking. When they opened it, they couldn't believe their eyes. Bella was still alive. The funeral erupted into chaos. Some people screamed, some fainted, and others ran for their lives. How could someone who was officially pronounced dead just wake up? Was it a medical mistake, or something much darker? Stay with me, because this story only gets weirder. Bella Montoya wasn't just another elderly woman. At 76 years old, she had lived a long life in Babahoyo, Ecuador, surrounded by family and friends who loved her deeply. She had worked as a nurse for decades, dedicating her life to helping others. Ironically, when it was time for her to receive medical care, the system failed her in the most shocking way possible. For years, Bella had been suffering from hypertension and cardiac issues. On June 9, 2023, she was rushed to Martin Icaza Hospital after experiencing severe stroke-like symptoms. Doctors noted that she was unresponsive, had shallow breathing, and showed no clear brain activity. Her family waited anxiously for news. After a few hours, doctors returned with devastating information. Bella had passed away. The hospital officially declared her dead and issued an official death certificate. The cause of death was listed as cardiorespiratory arrest, meaning her heart and breathing had completely stopped. Bella's son, Gilberto Barbera Montoya, was devastated. His mother was gone. The hospital handed over her body to the family so they could prepare the funeral immediately. At this point, no one doubted the doctors. When trained medical professionals declare someone dead, there's no reason to question it, or so they thought. Her family took her body home and began funeral preparations within hours. Little did they know, Bella wasn't actually dead. Bella's body was taken home the same day she was declared dead. In Ecuador, it's common for funerals to happen quickly, sometimes within 24 hours, especially in cases like this, where doctors confirm the death with an official certificate. Her family wasted no time making arrangements, and within hours, a small funeral gathering had begun. Friends and relatives arrived to pay their final respects. Bella was placed in a wooden coffin inside the funeral home, dressed in traditional mourning clothes. Her loved ones stood around her, some in tears, others whispering quiet prayers. The atmosphere was heavy with grief. 5 hours passed. As people sat around the coffin, sharing memories and comforting each other, something strange happened. A faint knocking sound came from inside the casket. At first, no one reacted. They thought maybe it was the wooden frame settling. But then, the coffin started to shake. Someone rushed forward and slowly lifted the lid. What they saw made their blood run cold. Bella Montoya, the woman who had been declared dead just hours earlier, was gasping for air, her eyes open in terror. Panic erupted inside the funeral home. Some people screamed. Others ran out of the building, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Bella's son, Gilberto, rushed to her side, unable to believe what was happening. She was alive. Shaken and confused, her family scrambled to call emergency services. Paramedics arrived quickly and found Bella still inside the coffin, struggling to breathe. Without wasting time, they lifted her out and rushed her back to Martin Icaza Hospital, the same place that had declared her dead just hours earlier. This was no ordinary medical mistake. Something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. Bella Montoya arrived back at Martin Icaza Hospital in critical condition. The same doctors who had signed her death certificate just hours earlier were now scrambling to save her life. She was placed in intensive care, hooked up to oxygen, and given emergency treatment. Her son, Gilberto, was in shock. He had spent the last several hours grieving his mother, only to witness her wake up inside her own coffin. Now, he stood outside the hospital, demanding answers. How could doctors make such a catastrophic mistake? The hospital issued a statement, claiming that Bella had suffered catalepsy, a rare medical condition where a person enters a death-like state, with slowed breathing, a weak pulse, and almost no movement. In some cases, catalepsy can be mistaken for death, especially if medical staff don't perform thorough checks. But Bella's family wasn't satisfied with that explanation. They insisted that doctors had been careless, failing to properly confirm whether she was truly dead. A routine check, like monitoring her heart for longer or using more advanced equipment, could have prevented this terrifying ordeal. As Bella remained in the hospital, her case made headlines across Ecuador and the world. People couldn't believe that a woman had nearly been buried alive due to a simple but horrifying medical mistake. Some began questioning whether this had happened before, without anyone realizing it. But as shocking as Bella's story was, it wasn't over yet. What happened next made it even more tragic. For a brief moment, it seemed like Bella Montoya had cheated death. But just as her family began to hope for a full recovery, her condition took a turn for the worse. Doctors kept her under intensive care, monitoring her closely. She remained weak and unresponsive, relying on oxygen to breathe. For days, her son Gilberto stayed by her side, praying for a miracle. But after 7 days in the hospital, on June 16, 2023, Bella Montoya passed away. For real this time. This time, there was no mistake. The official cause of death was once again listed as cardiorespiratory arrest, but this time, her family had no doubts. Bella's body was released to them once again, and this time, her funeral went ahead as planned. The eerie part? Some of the same people who had attended her first funeral just days earlier now stood in the exact same place, mourning her loss once again. This time, there was no knocking from the coffin, no sudden gasps for air, just silence. After everything that had happened, Bella Montoya was finally laid to rest. But the terrifying question remained: how many others have been buried alive without anyone realizing it? As shocking as Bella Montoya's story was, she wasn't the first person to wake up after being declared dead. Similar cases have been reported throughout history, raising disturbing questions about how often these mistakes happen. In 2014, a 91-year-old woman in Poland named Janina Kolkiewicz was declared dead after showing no signs of life. Her body was taken to a morgue and placed in cold storage. But 11 hours later, morgue staff were shocked to find her moving inside the body bag. She was very much alive. Another chilling case happened in South Africa in 2011. A 50-year-old man was pronounced dead after an illness and taken to a funeral home. But when mortuary workers came back later that day, they heard screaming from inside the refrigerated storage unit. The man had woken up in complete darkness, surrounded by corpses. In an even older case from the 19th century, doctors often found scratch marks inside coffins, suggesting that some people had been buried alive by mistake. This led to the invention of the safety coffin, a special type of burial coffin equipped with a bell or breathing tube, just in case the person inside wasn't actually dead. Bella Montoya's case was shocking, but it wasn't unique. It proved that even with modern medicine, mistakes still happen. And it makes you wonder, how many people have been buried alive without anyone ever knowing? Most people assume that when doctors declare someone dead, it's absolute. But in reality, death isn't always instant. It can be a process. There are rare medical conditions that can make a living person appear dead, even to trained professionals. One possible explanation for cases like Bella Montoya's is catalepsy, a neurological condition that causes the body to go into a rigid trance-like state. Breathing slows down to the point where it's almost undetectable, and the person becomes completely unresponsive. In some cases, their heartbeat can become so weak that even doctors have trouble detecting it. Another condition that can lead to misdiagnosed death is the Lazarus syndrome, a phenomenon where a person's heart suddenly starts beating again after CPR has failed. Scientists still don't fully understand how this happens, but it's been documented in multiple cases. Some patients have been declared dead, only to come back to life minutes or even hours later. There's also hypothermia, where a person's body temperature drops so low that their vital signs become almost impossible to detect. There have been cases where people were presumed dead in freezing conditions, only to be revived once their body was warmed up. Medical errors are another possibility. In cases like Bella's, a rushed examination or failure to use advanced equipment could lead to a premature death declaration. Standard medical procedures require doctors to check for multiple signs of death, including brain activity, pulse, and reflexes. But mistakes happen, even in hospitals. Bella Montoya's case is terrifying, but it forces us to ask a chilling question. How many other people have been buried alive simply because their death wasn't properly confirmed? Bella Montoya's story is one of the most disturbing real-life cases in recent history. It raises serious questions about medical procedures, human error, and how we define death itself. Some believe her case was simply a tragic mistake, a result of doctors failing to check her vital signs thoroughly before issuing a death certificate. Others think she may have suffered from catalepsy or Lazarus syndrome, conditions that could have made her appear dead even though she wasn't. But then there's a more unsettling theory, the idea that cases like this happen far more often than we realize. Bella was lucky. She woke up in time. But how many others haven't? How many people have been buried alive, trapped inside a coffin, unable to escape? Even with modern medicine, these stories prove that mistakes can still happen. And if there's one lesson to take from this case, it's this. Maybe we should think twice before assuming that death is always final. Bella Montoya's case is shocking, but it's not the only one. Stories like hers make us question everything we think we know about life and death. If trained doctors can mistake a living person for dead, how many others have suffered the same fate without anyone realizing? Was this just a rare medical error, or is there something even more terrifying we haven't uncovered yet? And if you thought this story was insane, wait until you hear about the 16-year-old hacker who broke into NASA and outsmarted the FBI. The government scrambled to find him, but what happened next will blow your mind. Click here to watch. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos that prove what happens when logic fails.